Dion. And before that, we had Ndawana by Shasha, Kelvin Moore, and Sykes. This is the Upside on on Channel Africa, the African perspective with Tebogo Lekhuleni and Mmatsheko Mosito. Don't go anywhere. After this little break, we get into conversation about that video that you saw on social media of the grade 10 learner being bullied by some seniors. And we want to understand or delve into the psychological aspects and impact thereof on the child himself, on the parents, and also to an extent understand the psychology of the bully and the bullies. What environments have they been exposed to sort of allow that behavior to be a norm to them and be so desensitized to the whole situation. It's 20 minutes after 1 p.m. Central African time. We'll get into our conversation with our psychologist right after this.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et votre 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
The Upside. On the Upside, your voice matters.
A disturbing video from Milnerton High School in Cape Town has again forced South Africa to confront the alarming reality of bullying in our schools. 8 learners have been suspended after violent group assault, captured on camera, showed a fellow student being beaten with a baton, belt, and hosepipe and a hockey stick. What makes this even more harrowing is that the victim is a cancer survivor, now left to battle emotional wounds in what should be a safe learning environment, that is the school. The video has sparked outrage and deep concern among parents, educators, and mental health professionals alike. As the nation demands accountability, the bigger question remains: how do we heal and shift the toxic cultures forming among our youth? Joining us now to unpack the psychological layers beneath incidents like this is Professor Jace Pillay, educational psychologist. Professor, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to The Upside. Let's get your sentiments. And upon seeing that video, what went through your own mind?
Good afternoon to you and to the viewers. So I think when I saw the video, I had some obviously mixed emotions. Mixed in the sense that what I saw was really not good at all. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we are also used to our South African context where we see this as happening. Actually, it's quite common, but only few incidents come to be known to us. So that's why I'm saying I've got a mixed kind of reaction. But obviously, it's painful to see that. It is very heartbreaking to see something like that, especially amongst children behaving in that ways. But behind that, there's a whole lot of reasoning as to this kind of behaviors. I'm not sure whether you want me to get into that a bit.
Please do. Please do.
All right. So if you look at in terms of the violence itself, right? So there's an interplay in terms of individual, family, and community factors. Now, if I come from a theoretical perspective, I will look at a biopsychosocial model in terms of trying to understand what is happening in our South African schools. And when I say biopsychosocial, obviously there's biological background to it, but I wouldn't want to dwell on that too much because I really think more it's psychological and social. But from the biological context, the research shows us that parents who are inherently violent and aggressive and have anger issues also let the children also have that. And also there's chemical imbalances in children as well that can also create problems. But as I'm saying, I'm not going to be looking for biological reasons. The main concern for me is the psychological factors. So if you look at the psychological factors, if a child is feeling insecure, lacks self-worth, self-value, low self-confidence. They're going to find other ways of acting out. And unfortunately, violence becomes one of the methods that they use in terms of getting attention and in terms of acting out. So from a social perspective, the violence in the families and the violence in the schools, in the communities spill over to the schools. So what we see basically is a continuous cycle of violence from one context, one system into another. So obviously then it is a systemic issue in terms of the violence itself. Now, if you look at the social context, you're looking at things like poverty, unemployment, crime, even our corruptions that we have. All of these things begin to manifest in terms of that behavior. Unfortunately, our children then see the violence at home, the violence in the communities, the violence in the media, the violence in the movies, and they think this is normal behavior. And this is why we need to behave in this way. So they internalize this old picture of being violent. So in terms of an economic point of view as well, the unemployment and the poverty creates a problem. In fact, what we found in our recent research is that children who are in the schools, and if they come from a poverty-stricken background, they get quite envious and jealous about other children. And because they don't have it, they want to steal. So the other things that contribute is the substance use and substance abuse, and also the gangs that now exist in schools. In some of the recent research that we did, we found like gambling, gangsterism are quite prevalent in those schools, and they are also a contributing factor in terms of what happens. So in a nutshell, basically, it's a systemic problem. And what we need to do is to see that how this violence is spilling over from one system, whether it's a family system, the community system, right into the school system. So that's basically in terms of what happens with regard to the violence itself. Of course, there are different types of violence. In terms of violence, it's more about physical force, but we also have verbal violence as well. Yeah. We have emotional kind of violence as well that contributes to where people go through the psychological turmoil of being victims of this. So obviously we're looking at the victims, but we're also looking at the perpetrators as well. They definitely need help because they're coming from a context where they have internalized these messages, and that is why they behave in this way.
It's a very big problem, Prof. And, you know, as you're speaking, I'm getting a sense that even though a lot of parents may send their children to school, and sometimes you just have no idea, you know, how your child is behaving in the school environment. But somewhere as a parent, you've missed a beat. You know, you dropped the ball somewhere that has contributed to your child behaving in this manner. But then it becomes a situation, Prof, where it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? You know, is it the school's responsibility to fix this? Is it the parents' responsibility to fix this? But I'm getting a sense from your response that it needs to be a collective effort because it is a systematic disease that we are trying to solve here. So let's talk about the schools' role in this whole thing. How can they participate? And it must be very tough then to respond to that because we're looking at children from different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, children with different family systems, etc. But what is the school's role in what is happening on their grounds?
You touched on a very important point. I think in terms of interventions, definitely, if I'm talking about a systemic point of view, we need to have multi-level systems approach in terms of dealing with this issue. So it becomes a joint effort in terms of the families, the schools, and the communities in terms of addressing this problem. And of course, government has to take the lead as well in terms of bearing the responsibility with regard to bringing all these different stakeholders together. Getting back to your question then in terms of schools, I think it's very, very prudent that schools need to be creating a safe environment. Children want to go to school and they need to be safe. And I mean, the first interaction that you saw in terms of what happened at Milnerton is parents went to the school to take the children out. And that's quite obvious because they are concerned about the safety of the children.
Yeah.
So what needs to happen is that we need to make our schools safe. And I'm talking about in a physical sense, firstly, that we need to have protective measures. We need to have fences around our schools. We need to have cameras. We need to have all those things that will make a school safe. And of course, we do know that government will always tell us there is no budget for this. And this is where communities and businesses must come together in terms of saying, okay, we need to be investing in those schools because those are children, they are going to be our future leaders. So we need to put some into that, whether it's in terms of finances or whatever time that we have in terms of making those schools safe. Then also the schools have a responsibility in terms of having anti-bullying, anti-violence code of conducts. But having that on paper is not just good enough. You need to implement it and see that measures are taken when it is violated. And I think that's what's happening. We do have good policies and codes of conduct in schools, but it becomes very questionable in terms of how they are implemented. And I think if we really put drastic measures in implementing them, we're definitely going to see some kind of differences in terms of curbing the school-based violence. The other thing that schools need to do is
Professor,
look at the curriculum.
Sorry to cut you there. I'm going to have to ask that we park it there for now so that we can get the latest in sports and business. But I'd love for us to continue the conversation and wrap it up properly. Our conversation with Professor Jace Pillay will continue, educational psychologist, right after this. It's 31 minutes after 1 p.m. Central African time. Let's get the latest in sports with Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Let's bet off with cricket news. Richard Ngavarva took 5 wickets in the second innings as Zimbabwe completed an innings and 73-run victory against Afghanistan on the